I'm not sure where to start, but I guess I need to lay down some context. My name is Jake, and I was married to Lisa for almost 8 years. We had a decent life together, nothing extravagant but comfortable. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I genuinely thought we were solid. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, had a nice backyard, and even hosted a few barbecues with the neighbors. Life was pretty good, or at least I thought it was. However, things started to change. At first, it was subtle. Lisa began working longer hours at her job as an event planner. She would come home late, claiming she had client meetings or last-minute preparations for upcoming events. I tried to be supportive, but part of me wondered if she was just making excuses. Then she started taking more spontaneous trips with her friends. I mean, I get it. Everyone needs a break now and then. But it felt like she was distancing herself from me. I noticed other little things too. She began to dress differently, spending longer in the bathroom getting ready, and even changed her perfume. The smell was so sweet and floral, a stark contrast to the more subtle scents she used to wear. I'd sometimes catch her on her phone, giggling or texting in a way that felt secretive. And when I'd ask her what was so funny, she'd respond with a quick, "Oh, just something silly," and change the subject. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I decided to sneak a peek at her phone while she was in the shower. I know, it was a violation of trust. But the urge to know what was happening in my own life, my own home, overwhelmed me. I found messages that left knots in my stomach. They were flirtatious, full of emojis, and definitely not from any of her friends. I didn't recognize the number. My heart raced as I scrolled through the conversation, my gut twisting further with each text. They were making plans to meet up and talk about the chemistry they shared. That was the moment it hit me. The betrayal wasn't just a rumor, it was a reality. I felt sick. I felt angry. I felt like I had been hit by a freight train. I locked the phone and placed it back. Down, my mind racing with thoughts of rage and confusion. I had to confront her, but I wanted to do it right. I wanted her to explain herself. When she came out of the shower, I didn't waste time. I confronted her, my voice shaking. "Who is this number?" I demanded, holding the phone in front of her like a trophy of my pain. The look on her face was a mix of surprise and annoyance, as if I had interrupted her in the middle of a dinner date. "What are you talking about?" She scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. "Don't play games with me, Lisa. I saw the messages," I replied, feeling the heat rise in my chest. I wanted her to feel my pain, to understand the hurt she had caused. Her reaction shocked me. "Oh, please, Jake, you're overreacting. It's just harmless flirting. You know how I am with my friends. You're so insecure." She tossed her hair over her shoulder and rolled her eyes, making me feel like I was the villain in this story. I felt like I was drowning, each excuse she threw at me pushing me deeper into the ocean of disbelief. The longer she talked, the more I realized that she wasn't going to admit anything. She was going to gaslight me into believing that it was all in my head, and I was left there feeling like the fool who fell for the lies I thought I knew. The emotional impact was a roller coaster. Initially, I felt rage, raw and consuming. But as the night wore on, that anger morphed into a deep sadness. I loved this woman. I thought she was my partner. How could she do this to me? I wanted to scream, to cry, to throw things. Instead, I just sat there, feeling the weight of betrayal settle in my chest like a stone. I thought about the life we built together, the plans we made, the dreams we shared. All of it felt shattered in an instant. As I sat in silence, the realization dawned on me. I needed to find a way to deal with this. I couldn't just let it slide or pretend it didn't happen. I had to make a decision, one that would determine the course of my life from that moment on. I can't say I had a clear plan at first, but I knew I couldn't stay in this toxic situation. I had lost trust in her, and I couldn't see a way back. I needed to figure out how to move forward, and I needed to make sure that whatever happened, she would feel the weight of her actions. I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but I was ready to find out. The next few days were downright surreal. I went through the motions of daily life, going to work, pretending everything was fine, but my mind was in a constant state of turmoil. The weight of the betrayal hung over me like a dark cloud. I felt like I was living in a house of cards, one breath away from everything collapsing. I kept replaying the confrontation in my head, her dismissive attitude and the way she tried to turn the tables on me. It was infuriating. One evening after work, I came home to our empty house. Lisa was out again, supposedly with friends for a girls' night. I ended up pacing the living room, my mind racing. I needed to gather evidence, something concrete that I could hold onto. I remembered the messages and how they were saved in her phone. I decided I needed to dig deeper. I knew it crossed a line, but at this point I didn't care. I needed to know who I was up against. With a sense of unease and determination, I pulled out my laptop and started doing some research. Turns out I wasn't just battling a vague notion of infidelity. I was fighting against someone real. Our neighbor, Mark, the guy who lived next door and always seemed too friendly for my comfort. He was the one texting her. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought of all the times I'd seen him lingering around our front yard, chatting with Lisa while I was at work. The casualness of their exchanges now felt sinister. I found his social media profiles and scrolled through his posts, noting how he would often comment on Lisa's pictures. "Gorgeous as always," he'd say. I felt a sickening surge of bile at the back of my throat. Every comment felt like a layer of betrayal being peeled away, exposing the raw, festering wound beneath. The next step was to watch them, to see what kind of relationship they really had. I parked my car a few houses down late that night, feeling like a spy in a bad movie. I watched as Lisa and Mark laughed together on the porch, their body language comfortable and flirtatious. They were drinking wine and leaning in close, sharing stories and laughs that should have only been shared with a spouse. I felt a mixture of pain and anger boiling inside me as I realized this wasn't just a harmless affair, it was a full-blown relationship. It seemed like forever before they finally went inside, leaving me to stew in my own fury. I drove home, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. I had to make sure Lisa felt the consequences of her actions. I wasn't going to just sit back and let this go unpunished. I wanted her to realize what she stood to lose, what she was throwing away for cheap thrills and lies. The next day I started hatching my plan. I thought about the house, the life we built. I realized I had options. I could sell the house and leave them with nothing. I could turn this betrayal into an opportunity to start fresh. And at the same time make her regret her choices. I didn't want to be the victim anymore. I wanted to take charge of my life. I decided to talk to a real estate agent. I wanted to know what the market looked like, how fast I could sell, and how much I could get for the house. I contacted a local agent and set up a meeting, all while pretending everything was fine at home. I kept a straight face, even as my heart raced at the thought of what was to come. During that meeting, I learned that the market was in my favor. Homes were selling quickly and I could get a decent amount. I felt a rush of excitement and determination. This was it. This would be my way out. I wasn't going to be the one left behind. I was going to make sure Lisa and Mark faced the consequences of their actions. As I returned home, I rehearsed my lines in my head. I imagined how the conversation would go when I finally confronted Lisa again, but this time I wouldn't be seeking answers or closure. This time I would be taking control. I felt empowered, ready to take the next step in my plan. Each passing day brought me closer to freedom, and the thought of it made me giddy. But I still had to be careful. Lisa was cunning, adept at playing the victim when it suited her. I couldn't let her catch on to my intentions just yet. I needed to play my cards right and make sure my moves were calculated. I thought about how I would break the news to her when the time was right. I wanted her to understand that her choices led to this outcome. Her betrayal would cost her everything. As I settled into my normal routine, I couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation. I was ready for the next phase of this twisted game, and I knew it was going to change everything. The house, my life, and my heart were all on the line, but I was determined to come out on top, no matter what it took. As the days turned into weeks, I became increasingly focused on executing my plan. I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in a long time. Each time Lisa came home late or received a text from that number, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was living in a reality show, and I was both the producer and the star. I kept my demeanor calm, acting as if everything was normal while the wheels were turning in my head. During this time, I started making small changes around the house. I cleaned out the garage, cleared out the clutter, and started staging rooms for the inevitable sale. I wanted the house to look pristine, ready for showings. It became my little project, a distraction from the emotional chaos that was my life. Each improvement felt like a step towards my new beginning, but I also needed to gather more evidence against Lisa and Mark. I decided to set up a few cameras around the house, discreetly placed where they wouldn't be easily spotted. I wanted to capture any moments that could prove their affair. I knew it was invasive, but I didn't care. This was about more than just revenge. It was about justice. One evening, while I was watching the footage from the cameras, I felt my heart race as I caught a glimpse of Lisa and Mark together again. They were sitting on our porch, laughing and sharing a bottle of wine. It was surreal how comfortable they were in what had once been our space. Mark leaned in, whispering something in her ear that made her throw her head back in laughter. The sight turned my stomach. It felt like a knife twisting deeper into my heart. The next day, I decided it was time to confront Lisa again, but this time I wanted to do it on my terms. I was ready to show her the evidence of her betrayal. I wanted her to see the consequences of her actions. I waited until she came home, casually tossing her keys into the bowl by the door, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. "Hey, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, a hint of annoyance in her tone. She was probably tired from her long day, but I couldn't let that distract me. I led her to the living room where I had a screenshot of one of her conversations displayed on my laptop. I opened it up, my heart pounding as I faced her. "I think we need to have a serious conversation about your relationship with Mark." Her expression shifted from confusion to annoyance. "What are you talking about, Jake? This is ridiculous." I pressed on, the anger bubbling to the surface. "Ridiculous? You think it's ridiculous that I saw you flirting with our neighbor, that I have proof of your betrayal? You're living in a fantasy world, Lisa." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're just being paranoid. Mark is a friend. There's nothing going on. You're the one who's insecure." I leaned forward, barely able to contain my rage. "Insecure? Is that really your excuse?" "I have the texts, Lisa. I have video of you two together. You can't just dismiss this." Her eyes widened, and for a brief moment I saw a flicker of fear. I clicked through the videos, showing her clips of their flirtations and the intimate moments that made it painfully clear what was happening. I wanted her to feel the weight of her actions, the reality of her betrayal crashing down around her. As each clip played, I felt a sense of satisfaction mixed with sadness. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was slipping away before my eyes. The look on her face was a mix of shock and defiance. She was caught, and there was no denying it. "Okay, fine, so what if I had some fun with Mark? It doesn't mean I don't love you." She spat, her voice rising in pitch. I couldn't believe my ears. "Fun? You think this is just fun? You're destroying our marriage and you think it's a joke." She sighed, rolling her eyes. "You're being dramatic, Jake. This is just a phase. We can work through it." Work through it. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "You think I'm going to stick around after this? You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. You've betrayed me, and I'm not willing to just forget about it." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of clarity. I wasn't just angry, I was resolute. I had been pushed to a breaking point, and I wasn't going to back down. As the realization washed over me, I felt a surge of empowerment. This was not just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. "Let me make this clear," I said, my voice steady. "I'm selling the house. I'm done with this charade. You can keep your affair, but I won't be a part of it anymore. You'll have to figure out your life without me." Her face twisted in disbelief, but I could see the fear creeping in. "You can't just leave me. You'll regret this," she yelled, her voice breaking. I stood up, ready to walk away. "Oh, I won't regret it, not for a second. This is your doing, Lisa. You brought this on yourself." As I walked out of the room, I felt an overwhelming sense of release. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of my life. The emotional turmoil that had consumed me for weeks began to dissipate, replaced with a sense of purpose and clarity. I was ready to move forward, ready to reclaim my life and leave the wreckage of our marriage behind. The journey ahead would be challenging, but I was determined to see it through. I had a plan, and this was just the beginning. The end of one chapter marked the start of another, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. After that confrontation, the atmosphere in the house shifted dramatically. The tension was palpable, and I could feel the weight of our unresolved issues pressing down on both of us. Lisa was furious, and I could see it in her eyes every time we passed each other in the hallway. She tried to act like everything was normal, throwing out casual comments and small talk as if nothing had happened. But I wasn't fooled. The sight of her filled me with a mix of anger and disappointment. I dove headfirst into the process of getting the house ready for sale. I contacted the real estate agent again, set up a meeting, and started making necessary improvements. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to get out before Lisa could retaliate or try to manipulate the situation further. I painted the living room, fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, and even planted some flowers in the front yard to boost curb appeal. Every improvement was a step toward my freedom, and it felt invigorating. While I was knee-deep in paint cans and tools, I noticed Lisa retreating further into herself. She spent more time at Mark's house, and I could only imagine what they were doing while I was preparing to sell the house that once held our dreams. I tried to ignore the pang of jealousy that surfaced every time I thought of them together. I reminded myself that I had chosen to walk away from that life, and Mark could keep her. But Lisa wasn't going down without a fight. She began spinning tales to friends and family about how I was the one who was being unreasonable, how I was throwing away our marriage over what she claimed was a harmless crush. She even went as far as to reach out to my family, trying to paint me as the villain in this story. I received calls, texts, and messages from concerned relatives who wanted to know what was going on. Each conversation felt like a rehash of my pain, but I managed to keep my composure. I explained the situation without going into too much detail. "It's complicated," I'd say, trying to deflect their worry. I wanted them to understand that I was fine and had made my decision, but it was hard to maintain that facade when the reality of what was happening was so raw. The day came for the first showing of our house. I was a bundle of nerves, pacing the living room while waiting for the agent to arrive. I carefully arranged the furniture, making everything look inviting. I wanted potential buyers to walk in and feel the warmth of a home, even if it wasn't mine anymore. Lisa, of course, was out, probably at Mark's place, further solidifying my belief that she had no intention of fighting for what we had built together. As I waited for the agent, I replayed everything in my mind, our good times, our travels, the laughs we shared. It all felt like a distant memory now, overshadowed by betrayal. When the agent arrived, I greeted him with a tight smile. We walked through the house together, and he began pointing out its best features, making suggestions on how to showcase them. I nodded along but kept my focus on the door, half hoping Lisa would come home and witness the process. I wanted her to see that I was moving on, that I was ready to let her go. The showing went well, and by the end of the day, I had received several inquiries. I felt a surge of hope as I realized this plan could work. I could sell the house and start anew. Maybe this was the closure I needed. But just as I was beginning to feel optimistic, Lisa walked through the door, her expression one of disbelief mixed with fury. "What is going on?" she snapped, her eyes darting to the agent standing in my living room. "You're seriously going through with this, selling the house?" I took a deep breath, knowing that I had to stand my ground. "Yes, I am. I can't stay here any longer, Lisa. This place has too many memories that will never be the same." She looked at me, anger radiating off her like heat. "You think you can just walk away from everything? You're being ridiculous. This is our home, Jake. Our home. You've made it clear that you've already moved on." I shot back, my voice steady. "I'm selling this house to take back control of my life. You can pretend all you want, but I'm not going to stay in a place that holds nothing but your lies." The agent stood awkwardly as we exchanged barbs, and I could feel the tension in the room escalate. Lisa's face turned a shade of red that told me she was furious. "You can't just sell it and leave me with nothing," she yelled. "You have no right to do this." I shook my head, determined not to back down. "You've made your choices, Lisa. You chose to betray me, and this is the consequence. You don't get to keep everything while I sit here and take the fall." I could see the gears turning in her head, and for a moment I thought she might actually plead with me to reconsider. But instead, she crossed her arms defiantly, her anger morphing into an icy calm. "You'll regret this, Jake, you'll see." With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving me with the agent, who looked more than a little uncomfortable. "Do you want to continue with the showing?" he asked hesitantly. I nodded, realizing that I had to push forward despite the chaos surrounding me. "Yes. Let's proceed." As we continued with the showing, I felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. I was in the thick of it now, and there was no turning back. I was committed to making this work, and I knew that the consequences of Lisa's actions would soon reveal themselves. The days that followed were filled with showings and offers, and before I knew it, I had an accepted offer on the house. The relief that washed over me was tangible. I had finally taken definitive control of my life, and now the next chapter awaited. But even as I celebrated my small victories, I knew that Lisa wouldn't let this slide easily. I had taken away her comfort, her stability, and I could feel the tension building, waiting for her next move. But I was ready. I had prepared for this moment, and I was not going to let her dictate the terms of my life any longer. The battle was just beginning, and I was ready for whatever she threw my way. Once I accepted the offer on the house, I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with anxiety. The weight of the decision hung over me like a dark cloud, but I knew deep down that I was making the right choice. I was finally untethering myself from the betrayal that had consumed me. However, I also knew that Lisa wouldn't take this lying down. She was cunning and would do whatever it took to regain the upper hand. For the next few days, I focused on the logistics of the sale. I packed up our belongings, sorting through mementos that tugged at my heartstrings. I came across old photos, reminders of happier times. I saw images of us on vacations, smiling at the camera, oblivious to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. There was a part of me that mourned the loss of that life, but I pushed those feelings aside. I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. I had a future to plan for. As I packed, Lisa became increasingly hostile. She'd throw out passive-aggressive comments about how I was ruining our lives. "You're making a huge mistake, Jake," she'd say, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I guess we'll see who ends up with the last laugh." I could feel the tension between us steadily rising, each encounter becoming more volatile. It was as if she was trying to get under my skin, and I refused to let her. One evening, while I was knee-deep in boxes, Lisa came home with a stormy expression on her face. "We need to talk," she declared, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. "Talk about what? Your affair? Or how you plan to manipulate the situation in your favor?" I shot back, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. She narrowed her eyes at me. "You think I'm the only one to blame here? You've pushed me away. You've made it impossible for me to be happy." "Happy?" I echoed incredulously. "You think cheating on your husband is the path to happiness? You've shown your true colors, Lisa. This isn't about me, it's about your choices." Her face contorted with anger, and for a moment I feared she might lash out, but instead she took a step back, her expression turning calculating. "You know, if you think selling the house will hurt me, you're wrong. I'll just find a way to make your life miserable instead." I raised an eyebrow dismissively. "Miserable? You think I'm afraid of you? I'm finally taking charge of my life. You have no power over me anymore. Let's see how tough you are when I tell everyone what you're doing," she retaliated, her voice low and threatening. "You think I won't reach out to your family, your friends? You'll be the villain in this story, Jake. You're ruining everything." I stood my ground, unwavering. "Go ahead. You've already shown them who you are. I'm not afraid of what you'll say or do. Your actions speak louder than any words you could throw at me." She glared at me, her face a mask of fury. "You'll regret this. You think you can just walk away from everything we built. You're wrong." With that, she stormed out, leaving me to wrestle with the implications of her threats. Part of me felt uneasy, but I brushed it aside. I had made my choice, and I couldn't let her manipulation dictate my emotions any longer. It was time to focus on the future. As the sale date approached, I felt a sense of urgency. I began looking for an apartment or a small place to rent, somewhere I could start fresh. I found a cozy little studio in a nearby neighborhood, far enough from memories of Lisa, but close enough to still have access to work and friends. I felt a sense of optimism as I signed the lease, envisioning a new beginning, one where I was in control of my life. However, the closer we got to closing the deal on the house, the more Lisa ramped up her tactics. She became desperate, reaching out to my family and friends, trying to paint me as the bad guy. I received messages from bewildered relatives asking for clarity, wondering why I was suddenly selling the house and what had happened to our marriage. Each conversation was like a gut punch, forcing me to relive the pain all over again. But I stood firm, ready to defend my choices. I explained the situation in simple terms, emphasizing that I was moving on from a toxic environment. It's complicated. I would start, but eventually I laid it all out. I told them about the affair, about the betrayal. I didn't want to see Lisa vilified, but I also wouldn't take the blame for her actions. While I handled my family, I also prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Lisa. I knew she would fight to keep me wrapped in her web of manipulation. As the closing date approached, I felt like I was gearing up for battle. On the day of closing, I arrived at the office, heart pounding. I was excited to finally be rid of the house, but I also felt a twinge of anxiety about what Lisa might do next. I could almost predict she would try to make one last-ditch effort to sway me, to convince me that I was making a terrible mistake. When I walked in, I saw her sitting in the waiting area, a smirk playing on her lips. "Look who's here," she called out, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Save it, Lisa. I'm not interested in your games anymore," I replied, my tone clipped. She stood up, pushing her hair back defiantly. "You really think this is the end? You'll regret selling this house. You'll regret leaving me." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "You don't get to dictate how I feel anymore. This is about my life, my future, not yours." We exchanged glances, the air thick with tension. I felt like we were in a standoff, both unwilling to back down. But as I took a deep breath, I reminded myself that I was ready for this. I was finally moving on from the toxic cycle of manipulation and betrayal. As the closing agent called us into the office, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I was on the brink of a new chapter, and I wouldn't let Lisa's threats deter me. What she had done was not only a betrayal but a catalyst for my transformation. No matter how she tried to frame the story, I was the one taking control, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next. With the papers signed and the house officially sold, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. I had won this battle, but I knew that the war wasn't over. Lisa would still want to fight back, but I was ready for her. I had reclaimed my life, and I was determined to keep moving forward, no matter what she threw my way. With the sale of the house finalized, I felt an incredible sense of liberation. It was as if a heavy blanket had been lifted off me, revealing the vibrant world that lay ahead. I could finally breathe again, free from the suffocating grip of betrayal and resentment. But I also knew Lisa wasn't finished with her games. I had no illusions about that. In the days following the closing, I moved into my new studio apartment. It was small but perfect for starting fresh, a blank slate where I could rediscover myself. I decorated with a few essentials, focusing on making the space feel homely. I hung some of my favorite artwork and filled the shelves with books I had been meaning to read. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace wash over me as I settled in. However, Lisa's shadow loomed large. Rumors started to circulate among our mutual friends, and I often received calls asking for clarification about what had happened between us. I kept my responses straightforward, explaining that I left because of her infidelity. "I'm moving on," I'd say simply, refusing to let her spin her narrative. I was determined to maintain my dignity and not engage in a public feud. Then one day, I received a message from Lisa that sent a chill down my spine. "You're going to regret this, Jake. You'll see," it read. I felt a mix of anger and pity. She was still clinging to the idea that she could manipulate the situation to make me feel guilty. But I had made my choice, and I wouldn't allow her threats to shake my resolve. I decided to confront her once and for all. I couldn't live under the constant cloud of her manipulations. I invited her to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop away from the neighborhood, where we could talk without the distractions of our past life. When I arrived, I spotted her sitting at a table scrolling through her phone. She looked up, and for a moment I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, but it quickly dissipated, replaced by the familiar defiance. "Nice place you picked," she remarked, her tone sarcastic. "Cut the crap, Lisa. I didn't ask you here to exchange pleasantries," I said, taking a seat across from her. "I wanted to talk about the threats you've been making. This is getting ridiculous." She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? I'm not sorry for anything. You brought this on yourself." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. "You're right. I did make a choice, but so did you. You can't keep blaming me for your actions. You need to stop playing the victim." Lisa's eyes flashed with anger, but I pressed on. "I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to tell you that I'm moving on. I want you to understand that your words and threats have no power over me anymore. I've let go of the past, and I won't allow you to manipulate me into feeling guilty." Her expression shifted from anger to frustration, then fear. "You think you can just walk away without consequences? You'll miss what we had, Jake, you'll see." I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and sympathy for her predicament. "I won't miss what we had because what we had is gone. You broke the trust between us, and I can't rebuild that. I'm better off without you, and so are you. This isn't the end of the world. We both have the chance to start anew." The silence that followed was heavy, but I could see her defenses crumbling. Perhaps she finally understood the magnitude of her choices. "I don't want to be the villain in this story," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I softened, recognizing that beneath the anger there was a person who was scared of losing everything. "Then stop playing that role. You can change your narrative, Lisa. You can choose to be better, but it starts with taking responsibility for your actions." As the conversation continued, I could see the walls she had built around herself slowly coming down. We talked about the future, the possibility of moving on, and I encouraged her to seek help. I urged her to reflect on her choices and figure out who she wanted to be. It felt strange to offer her support after everything that had happened, but I realized that holding onto anger wouldn't help either of us. When we finished, I stood up and offered her a hand. "I hope you find your way, Lisa. I truly mean that. But from here on out, it's your journey. I'm moving forward, and I hope you can too." As I walked out of the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Confronting Lisa had been cathartic. I no longer felt the weight of her threats or the burden of resentment. I had taken back my power, and it felt liberating. In the days that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I made new friends, delved into my hobbies, and reconnected with family. I took time to reflect on what I wanted out of life, and for the first time I felt hopeful. I learned that life is unpredictable, and it often throws us into darkness. But it's how we respond to those challenges that define us. I had faced betrayal head-on, and instead of becoming bitter, I chose to grow. I learned that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting the lessons learned and using them to forge a better path. As I settled into my new life, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever known. I was no longer a victim of someone else's choices. I was Jake, a man ready to embrace whatever came next. The future was mine, and I was determined to make the most of it.